This is the true and horrifying story of Sarah, an ordinary girl growing up in a family that seemed perfect from the outside. Her father, Dan, was controlling and harsh, while her mother was kind and supportive. Despite the difficult home environment, Sarah managed to maintain normalcy in her life. One night, she sneaked out of her house to attend a party with Chris, her boyfriend. For the first time in her life, Sarah enjoyed the party. She danced, laughed, and reveled in the moment with Chris by her side. Clearly, they were deeply in love and wanted to spend their lives together. But things didn't work as planned. During the party, Sarah's dad discovered she wasn't in her room. He got really mad and waited for her to return. When Sarah tried to sneak back into her room in the morning, her dad caught her. They had a heated argument, and Sarah, in the heat of the moment, declared that she would leave home when she turned 18. Later, Sarah tries to convince her mother and sister about her plans to travel around the country while working to support herself. Her father, Dan, heard every word and retreated to the basement, revealing a secret room hidden behind a bookshelf. Time flies, and Sarah completed her graduation. Her 18th birthday is just around the corner. Yet, something was off. In a quiet conversation with her mother, Sarah discovered that her father spends a lot of time in the basement. One fateful day, Sarah's life took a dramatic turn. When Irene went shopping, Dan cunningly led Sarah into the basement. Before she could realize what was happening, he locked her inside. The box contained basic essentials, indicating this was pre-planned. To escape, she desperately opened the security lock, but after 3 unsuccessful attempts, the light switched off, leaving her in the terrifying darkness. Dan visited her after 4 days. He always wanted to punish her for disobeying him. When she tried to escape, he brutally dragged and assaulted her. Meanwhile, Sarah's mother, Amy, was worried. She knew something wasn't right and called the police. An officer arrived and Amy told him everything. But Dan manipulated him, claiming Sarah went on her planned trip across the country of her own will. Weeks later, Chris, Sarah's boyfriend, showed up at the house to find her. To protect his act, Dan told him Sarah had run away with a friend named Steve, and they were now living in Florida. Like Sarah, the sad truth remained locked away, hidden behind a bookshelf. Sarah celebrated her 18th birthday in that cold, hidden room after 21 days. Dan brought her a cake and a red nightgown for her birthday and forced her to wear it. For nearly a year, he assaulted her every day. Pleased with Sarah's obedient behavior, Dan fits a clock in the room. After a year, Sarah became pregnant with her father's child. Alone and terrified, she pushed herself into labor and gave birth to Marie. Meanwhile, Dan was living 2 lives. The first was with his wife, Irene, and the second was with Sarah in the basement. Sarah's mother was still waiting for her. When she suggested hiring a detective to find Sarah, Dan got mad and told her to forget about her. In her second pregnancy, she gave birth to Michael. A decade has passed. Sarah's children, Marie and Michael, grow up in the darkness of the hidden room. Despite all the terrible things, Sarah loves her kids. With her soft words, she comforts them tenderly. Every night, she soothes their fears and sparks their imaginations with new, fascinating stories, to give them a piece of the world that has been robbed off. Eventually, Sarah brings third life into this world, Thomas. Being polite and calm, she convinces Dan to carry Thomas upstairs. The tiny room is already too small for them, and taking care of another baby is beyond her capacity. So, Dan leaves Thomas at their doorstep, along with a note penned by Sarah, explaining she can't afford to take care of the baby due to financial issues. As Irene reads this, she finds comfort in knowing Sarah is alive. A second note is hidden beneath. Tragically, Dan discovers it, and once again, he viciously assaults Sarah. Days turned into years, and Marie has grown into a beautiful young woman. Her beauty catches Don's attention, raising Sarah's concerns. She begs him to leave her untouched by his cruelty, as she never wanted Marie to endure the same pain. In retaliation, Dan shut off their air supply, leaving them gasping for breath in the enclosed space. In a few years, Sarah is pregnant with her 4th child. But disaster strikes when a storm hits, flooding the basement where they're trapped. Desperate, Sarah signals for help by flashing a light through a crack in the cement wall. A man sees the light and alerts Dawn, who, in rage, assaults Sarah, causing her to tragically lose the baby, a moment that breaks Sarah completely. Dan buries the tiny child in the yard and returns to the basement. When Marie and Michael innocently ask when they'll be allowed to see the world outside, Dan blames their mother. It's all because of her bad behavior. Overwhelmed by the suffocating atmosphere and her children's unending questions, Sarah throws things in frustration. After being exhausted, she falls asleep, thinking of happier times with Chris. When she wakes up, her children clean the room and prepare some food for her. Knowing they are old enough to understand, Sarah reveals the painful truth about Dan and what he did to her. The revelation shocks them, but Sarah soothes their fears. Their situation becomes even more difficult when Dan's financial troubles force him to sort food supplies in the basement. As times get rough, Dan creates a wicked plan to save money by choking Sarah and ventilating the basement with polluted air. But fate has other plans. Thomas interrupts Dan's evil scheme, saving their lives without knowing. Since childhood, Marie often gets sick because of asthma. Using home remedies, Sarah tries to treat her. But one day, things get out of hand. Marie suffers from a severe asthma attack. Sarah pleads with Dan to get medical help, fearing Marie might not survive. In the end, Dan agrees, but only after Sarah promises to stay quiet about their living situation. Leaving Michael in the basement, Dan takes her and Marie to the hospital. Marie had stopped breathing and was about to die. However, the doctors saved her life. Exhausted yet alert, Sarah scans the hospital, preparing for her escape. She came up with a plan and intentionally spilled water on medical forms when Dan stepped away to replace them. Seizing the opportunity, she contacted a nurse for help. The truth is finally revealed. After an officer cuffs Dan, officers fill the house, finding and freeing Michael from the basement. Time passes, and we see Marie, Thomas, and Michael playing outside while Sarah, Irene, and Amy watch over them from the house's porch. Suddenly, her long-lost love Chris arrives on his motorcycle. He apologizes to Sarah, confessing his regrets for not searching harder for her and believing her father's lies. He gifts her a pink motorcycle helmet he bought when she turned 18, back when they dreamed of going on an adventure together. And this is how the movie ends. Sarah endured unimaginable pain and suffering, yet she never gave up. She raised her children with love and instilled strength to persevere. Ultimately, she found her way to freedom, signifying that no matter how bleak the situation may seem, there is always a light at the end of the tunnel. Remember to like, share, and subscribe to our channel. If you have any suggestions for future movies, please leave them in the comments section below. Until next time, take care, goodbye,